and then I'm going to broadcast. We all ready?
Yeah.
Hey, viewers.
All right, here you go.
That's you, Sarah.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for participating in our virtual talk tonight. We're very excited to be hosting David New and to talk about his story about Nourse Tree Farm. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Sarah Rosero, and I work with Snohomish County, Snohomish Conservation District. And my position here is Community Engagement Coordinator. Our topic today is going to be Nourse Tree Farm. So David New is here with us. So first, we used to host events like this. Now with COVID-19, we're changing gears and now we're hosting events like this. It's not as glamorous, but I still feel that it's important to connect with the community, share stories, and to get in a little bit of education on the way. So thank you, David, for being with us today. He's going to share his story, journey, and lots of hard work with being co-owner of Nourse Tree Farm and the story that goes along with his adventure of having such a great certified tree farm and winning an award. So how you're going to interact with us tonight: all of your audio lines are muted. There's privacy. We cannot see your screens. Only our panelists are able to share video and speak with you all tonight. Different ways you can communicate with us. Please feel free to use your chat function to communicate any technical difficulties you're having. But for specific questions for David during his presentation, please use the Q&A tab to ask questions, and we'll be answering those at the end of his presentation. So first, to tell you a little about Snohomish Conservation District. We work with various partners, landowners, farmers, urban and rural residents. The great thing about us is that you work with us on a voluntary basis and we're non-regulatory. And we have various funding, which gives us a very diverse funding ability to help various folks. So from youth education to our community conservation team, habitat restoration and floodplains team, to sustainable agriculture, we have various staff members who can help you with your needs, and we would really appreciate if you contacted us if you needed any assistance with your property. Some of our upcoming workshops, June 23rd and 25th, we will be having septic care workshops for Bothell and Marysville residents. Others can join, but priority will be given to those residents in those cities. And then please just email us to be added to any of our lists so you can be notified when we're having various workshops that might interest your interests. So a little bit about David. This is a picture of David and his family, and you'll be hearing about the adventures and all sorts of little critters and a little bit of history about the farm that he shares with his family. And we just want to give you all a big thank you for joining us tonight. And I want to pass it off to David so he can start his presentation. Thank you all.
Oops. Hold on. Wrong slide. One moment, please.
This is Catherine. I also work for the Snohomish Conservation District. I just wanted to let you know we also have a climate resilience for rural properties class coming up next Wednesday. It is also a webinar. If you are interested, please also email us at outreach@snohomishcd.org or check our events page and you can sign up to attend next Wednesday's webinar with Carrie Browsick, one of our farm planners.
Sorry about that. Here we are at the beginning. Thank you for that introduction, Sarah. This is a story about Nourse Tree Farm, our family tree farm, our story. It's property that is, we're going to talk about tonight as how we are a certified tree farm, how we manage our property to take care of the woods on it, the water that runs through it, the wildlife that we find on it, and how we use it to have fun with. This is our family. We're the ones that own the tree farm. Me and my wife, Dar, our daughter, Jen, and her husband, Jeff Parker, and our grandchildren, our grandsons, Tyler and Alex. Our tree farm is located in northern Snohomish County, not too far from Interstate 5, about 40 miles north of Seattle, and about 40 miles south of Bellingham. We happen to live in Bellingham, and so we take the trek on a regular basis down to the tree farm to work in the garden and do other things. It's property that was purchased by Dar's grandfather in 1942 from Pope and Talbot, which was a big timber company in Western Washington. And before Dar's grandfather bought it, it was logged by Pope and Talbot. And here we can see an old cedar stump that they logged. There's a notch here for a springboard, and over time then, this was done in about the 30s, and over time then a spruce tree grew out of the top of this one. And here's an old cedar stump here that had a second growth cedar tree grow right next to it, and then a little branch came out of that cedar tree and landed on top of the stump and then rooted itself into the stump and became a new tree unto itself. These two trees are genetically identical and still connected here too by the umbilical. Now, when Pope and Talbot logged the property, they used a railroad to take all the lumber off. And this is a landform, a light art landform image of our property. And on it, you can see where there are looks like roadways. Well, these are old rail beds here that were used by Pope and Talbot to take the timber away to a sawmill over near Bryant on where Highway 9 is now. So I've been looking for the last 10 years for evidence of the railroad, and finally this last winter I found what's called a fish plate, which connects two rails together on top of the ties. So Dar's grandfather bought the property for family recreation, and Dar's Uncle Bob ran cattle on it for a number of years. And it wasn't really a tree farm until we took over. But in the meantime, Dar's mother, Nina Hoyt, and her sister, Jeanette Turner, starting in the 1950s, had a big garden here at the river, or what we call the river. And when Dar and I first met as students up at Western in Bellingham, Nina would bring her a big box of vegetables every weekend from the garden. And she continued doing that after we were married. And we continue doing that today, having a big garden at the property. Taking lots of produce home. We fill 3 freezers full of stuff so that we can have food from the garden all year round. Before Jen and Jeff got married, we went into dahlias in a big way and provided all the dahlias for their wedding. Getting into our work here. We also like to use the property for family gatherings, family reunion. We've had several large gatherings over the year. Every fall, or every summer, we raise a big patch of pumpkins. And in the fall, then, we have a pumpkin party where the grandkids and all their friends and their parents and all our friends and all their grandkids come, and everybody gets to carve a pumpkin. We've had up to 100 people attending our pumpkin parties. In addition to carving pumpkins, we'll have games, including a treasure hunt in the straw. We'll have prizes in the straw there. And this last year, we branched out into launching apples and pumpkins at a target, which you can't see here. I think at some point in the future, we'll end up using a trebuchet like this one that belongs to a friend of mine down near Chehalis. Also, 2 or 3 times a year, we'll have cider pressings. We have several apple trees that provide apples, and we first of all crush the apples like you see Tyler doing here, and then we press them. Keep going.
That was almost too much action. Slippery right there.
That cider does taste good. Last year we made about 70 gallons, most of which we gave away. Jeff took some home to turn into hard cider. And we keep about 6 or 8 gallons ourselves, but the rest of it we give away to the friends that come and help us. In the wintertime, we've been known to declare a snow day to go out and play in the snow. This last year, we didn't have much snow, so all we could do was go for a walk in the woods, look at the waterfall, go down to the river. Last fall, Jen took a class from Washington State University Extension Forestry about how to turn sap from big leaf maple trees into syrup. And we collected a whole bunch of this, though Alex tried to shortcut the system. And we did a whole lot of this. Days and days of this to get just almost a gallon of this over the course of the winter. And no, the state of Vermont does not have to worry about us putting them out of business. Now, it hasn't always been a walk in the park for us. We almost didn't get to keep the property.
Hi, I'm Darnu, and this is Alex Parker. We are the 3rd and 5th generations of property owners of this property. This property has been in my family since 1942. It's been a great place to come and play, to fish, to grow vegetables. It's just really meant a lot to us.
My name is Dave New. I'm one of the co-owners of this property. This property was owned by Dar's Uncle Bob until he died in 2004, at which time it was passed on to 10 heirs. We went through a 6-year process of settling his estate before we were able to keep it. The property was sold to a developer, but then the recession hit and he went bankrupt and couldn't take it. And so that gave us then the opportunity to buy it from the estate. I took a class from WSU Forestry Extension called Ties to the Land. Based on what I learned from the Ties to the Land class, our family got together and discussed the terms that we would like to have in a limited liability company. And with the assistance of an attorney, we were able to write those terms down in a legal manner and then record it so that the ownership was transferred from us as individuals to the limited liability company, which now owns the land. By having the land in a limited liability company, we can be comforted to know that it will not take the 6 years it did when Uncle Bob died to transfer the land from one generation to the next. It will be a more simple process.
My name is Jen Parker, and I'm one of the co-owners of this family tree farm. Succession planning is important to me because I watched my family go through the fairly painful process of settling a estate with many heirs. And I really appreciate that we have a plan in place that'll help maintain this as an open space within our family with a clear direction, and we have a forestry management plan that really sets out what this property can be for the future and our future generations.
I'm Kevin Zobrist, professor with Washington State University, part of the Extension Forestry program here in Snohomish County, Washington, and also a tree farm inspector and certified forester. As the saying goes, failing to plan is planning to fail. Right after mom and dad pass away, when the family dynamic has suddenly shifted, when emotions are running high, this isn't the time to figure out what to do with the tree farm. It isn't the time where you want to discover that no one's in a position to take on the tree farm, no one knew what mom and dad were doing or what has to happen next. It's not the time to discover that everybody has a different idea about what should happen with the land, and maybe some siblings want to keep it, some don't. If the siblings that want to keep it don't have the resources to buy out the others, that creates problems, and then it seems like the default is to simply sell it and divide up the proceeds. So succession planning can really be the difference between a family legacy and a family squabble.
Once we have land like this, the only thing we can do is save it and maintain it for the future. And I'm really glad we're able to do that.
Now, I can't emphasize enough the importance of succession planning. And it doesn't have to apply just to a tree farm, but if you have a cabin by the lake, for instance, this is something that you can do the same process. It's important to have an open family discussion about the future of the property with everybody involved. And then it's important to have a legal mechanism for ownership and transfer of that ownership. In our case, we chose the limited liability company because that way we will be able to gift portions of it, shares of it to our grandkids over time without having to have the property recorded with the county each time we do that. And then it's also important to have a continued family conversation about management of the property so that everybody's on board for what will happen when that eventuality does occur. And I can't say enough about the ties to the land class developed by Oregon State University Extension Forestry that is offered by the WSU Extension Forestry on a regular basis here in our state. So when we took possession of the property, we needed to get it back on open space because we had sold the property to the developer. It had gone off of open space and our taxes were really high. So to get it back in open space, it made sense for us to do it as open space forestry. And in order to do that, I needed to have a forest management plan. Well, at the time, I didn't know anything about forestry. So I hired a forester out of Everett, Pete Blansett, who at the time worked for S.A. Newman Company. And he went out and looked at the land. And then as he was putting the forest management plan together for us, he said, "Dave, you have an over-mature stand of alder on the property. And unless you log it and take it down now, it'll fall down and then you'll have a real mess on your hands." Well, we're going to take a little detour here. When I was growing up, that's me pointing there, our family's spare time revolved around my dad fishing. And so we would spend a lot of time camping up in the national forests or going for hikes up in the high country to the highland lakes. And so my notion of forest was somewhat of the forest was wilderness. It wasn't something that you took care of or managed. My idea of what a forest needed was basically benign neglect, and nature would take care of itself. Other than, say, put a few trails in it, you didn't really need to do anything. You didn't have to worry about planting trees in the understory or getting rid of the reed canary grass that's an invasive species or the Himalaya blackberries, let alone clear cutting. So we had a very long and hard family discussion about what we were going to do. On the one hand, we could just leave it and we'd have woods. And on the other hand, we could follow our professionals' advice, our foresters' advice, and harvest the timber on the property, and then have some money left over that we could replant it with, so that it would come up and be a better forest in the end. Well, what we ended up doing was deciding to log 60 acres up on top of the hill, and we left a buffer on the slope of the hill between the area that we logged and a seasonal stream that flows through the property. And we hired our forester, Pete Blancett, to manage that whole process for us. And that's important to have if you do this, to have a forester take in charge there, because he knows the ins and outs of the whole thing. One of the things that we needed to do to log, when we logged it, was to get a bridge across that seasonal stream. And our deal with the logging contractor was that we would provide a bridge, which in this case was a flat car with some decking on it, and he would bring in the crane to set the bridge in place. And this was a huge crane. It came in on 2 trucks. It took them 2 hours to set the crane up once they got to the site. And then it took them a half an hour to attach the rigging to the crane and get it ready to lift off the trailer. Here you can see how it is a flat car with wood decking on the top of it. And then once it was ready to lift off the trailer, it took about 2 minutes to get the bridge off the trailer and down onto the abutments. And then it took them 2 more hours to get the crane taken apart. So all told, including the setup time and from them coming out, from the crane company coming out and then getting back to the shop, it was 6 hours of crane time for 2 minutes of lifting. Now, note the color of the gate here. So when we replanted, again, we had our forester help us. We decided that we wanted to have different kinds of different stands. At the north end, the north third of the property, we planted alder again because it's a quick maturing tree. And then on the southern 2/3, we planted mostly Douglas fir. Now, these 2 species, Douglas fir and alder, do not grow in the shade. They're shade intolerant, and they have to have clear cuts in order for them to grow. Now, it took me a long time to have this sink in. And another way of saying it is that if you want to have Douglas fir grow, it has to be in a clear cut. So as you drive down the highway and you see clear cuts with Douglas fir being taken out, you can know that it'll be used for housing, to build houses with at this time, and then in 50 years' time, when they harvest it again, it'll be ready to harvest then as well. Douglas fir is the only tree grown locally that has the material strength to be used for framing. So if you don't want your house to be made entirely out of concrete and steel, then you need to have the Douglas fir, which then requires the clear cutting in order to grow it. So we replanted everything in 2015 in the springtime. And on Easter every year since then, we go up on the hill and Dar and Jen take pictures of us boys alongside of one of our trees. This was the first year. And you can just barely see the tree here in the second year. And the tree's getting a little bit bigger every year, and the boys are getting bigger. And Jeff and I are just getting older. So Pete was right. This is a picture I put together from snapshots that I took back about the same time we were permitting to do the logging. These are alder trees that were of the same vintage as the ones that we logged up on top of the hill. These, however, we did not log. This is what those trees look like today. So had we not taken those trees down, we would have had 60 acres that look like this today instead of like this. For one of my birthdays, Dar bought me a wildlife camera, and we put it up, and we started getting pictures right away of things, of animals that are there when we're not there. We have lots of deer. We have our cameras set up so that they take a burst of 5 pictures a second apart, and these 2 little guys just nicely sat up right in front of us, just started to have their little sparring right in front of the camera. Now, Dar, being the retired school teacher, thought it was important that the deer on our property learn how to cross the road where there are signs. And so she taught them how to read, basically. We have kind of a love-hate relationship with our deer. Here you can see some of the damage done in the fall. The bucks rub the velvet off their antlers on our trees and take away the bark, and it's kind of hard on them. I've had people ask me if they could hunt on the property, and last fall, one of Jen's co-workers asked if he could go bow hunting, and about an hour after he got onto the property, he texted me this picture, and so I texted back my big game picture. We have our cameras catch lots of different things: red-tailed hawk, an owl, hummingbird, great blue heron. This isn't a wildlife camera, but we do have lots of nests with in this case, robins in them. And what is it that woodpeckers do? We have lots of bird houses. These are bat boxes, wood duck box. Now, here's the real wild animals. When I saw this picture, I was pretty sure I'd seen one like it before. Sure enough. Now, last summer, we had a family of coyotes, and Dar, again being the retired school teacher, immediately said, "Oh, kindergarten coyotes," because they're all in a line, just a straight line right behind their mama as they walk down, in this case, the trail. She had a lot of mouths to feed. And one day we caught her in the morning coming by with breakfast, at lunchtime with lunch, and in the evening with dinner. On another day, they decided to have a romp in front of one of our cameras. And we got a whole series of pictures here where they were just playing. I think my favorite animals to see on the cameras are the bears. We went for a whole year before we finally got this good picture of a bear. We've got several more since then. Here's a healthy looking specimen. Now, this is a series of 8 shots of a sow. Here's her cub. She came right over to the camera. And the next picture after this one was the camera looking straight up into the air. She had knocked it over. Yes, Tyler, a bear tore this log apart to get at the grub inside of it because it was hungry after a long winter's nap. Last fall, another bear decided that it wanted our apples more than we did. Climbed up in the tree, broke a couple of branches, but I was able to tie it up. I glued it back together and tied it up, and it seems to be doing just fine this spring. I continue to be amazed at the variation and variety within the black bear species. This poor old guy's kind of been through the ringer. And here's another healthy looking specimen. But now this one, this is a really buff dude. And also note the really dense, short fur on it. Just an excellent specimen. You don't see two adults and a cub together very often. So we call this one desperately seeking Goldilocks. Last fall, we found this tail end of a salmon up on top of the hill about a quarter mile from the nearest water. And we have a run of pink salmon or humpies that come back on the odd numbered years. All the pinks come back in the odd numbered year in Puget Sound area here. This particular shot was taken in 2009. Here's some that were shot this last year, 2019. We make it a family tradition to go down and see these guys in the stream on the odd numbered years. It's just amazing to watch them come up and spawn just right there in Pilchuck Creek right beside us here. The pink salmon come up Pilchuck Creek right here. They don't come up the seasonal stream that goes through our property because in early October when the pinks are running, there's no water in this stream. However, we do have silvers that come up it, cohos. And early on, a number of years ago, Dar's grandfather and uncle diked the stream, put a channel off to the sides of the fields, the hay field and the pasture, so that they could have better use of their pasture. But over time, at the lower field, behind the dike, it filled in with sediment, and the stream splayed out all across the lower field and lost all definition.
My name is Kevin Zobrist. I'm a professor with the Washington State University Extension Forestry Program, as well as a tree farm inspector and certified forester. Active management is how we achieve our goals and objectives. There's a misconception that management means wall-to-wall clear cutting or trying to impose our will upon nature, but rather it's coming alongside nature, working with natural processes to achieve our desired outcomes of healthy wildlife habitat, healthy resilient forests, clean water, and sustainable wood production.
My name is Dave New. I'm one of the co-owners here at the Nourse Tree Farm. We're standing in what used to be a cattle field, and over time it became filled with reed canary grass that filled up and choked out the stream so that the channel could not get through the stream. It just splayed out through it.
My name is Jen Parker. I'm the 4th generation co-owner of this tree farm. We knew that the stream channel got lost in the reed canary grass, but we didn't understand that there were salmon in the stream until one year we were walking out here in the fall, and we were really excited to see a whole bank of eagles perched above our field. And when we went out to see what they were looking at, we noticed a whole bunch of salmon carcasses scattered across the reed canary grass. The salmon had clearly tried to swim over the top of the reed canary grass and had been captured by the eagles. And that's when we realized that the little creek that flowed through our property was a salmon-bearing stream.
Next spring, as we were permitting for a logging project up on top of the hill, we needed to put a bridge across the stream so that we could access to get the trucks in and out. And the biologist that was sent out for the hydraulics project permit as a part of the forest practice permit pointed out to us that we had some baby coho salmon in the stream. And then I realized that, gee, this really is a salmon stream and that we needed to do something to restore it. So I asked him, who should we talk to in order to get the stream in the lower field restored? And he said, talk to the Conservation District.
My name is Ryan Williams. I'm a habitat restoration specialist with the Snohomish Conservation District. The primary goals with this project were to reconnect the creek here on Dave New's property to help contain the water, but also to allow coho fish to come upstream. And so here we were trying to create a new channel, trying to increase habitat as well as improve the vegetation here and put in native species. So initially here we just worked with Snohomish Conservation District. We just brought in our own technical staff coming up with ideas for the project, and then we pursued grant funding through the Department of Ecology to do the actual stream restoration. So that paid for digging the channel, putting in wood, and then planting some of the buffer. And then on top of that, we found funding through the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, a program through the Farm Service Agency. And that paid for planting, and it also provides a rental payment to the landowner to to restore their land.
My name is Carson Moscoso. I'm a habitat specialist with the Snohomish Conservation District. We work with quite a diversity of landowner involvement. We have landowners who want to be extremely hands-off and let the district acquire funding, design projects, and carry out implementation without really playing any role. We have other landowners who want to have some hand in the design and layout of the project, but let the district go ahead with implementing it. And we also have other landowners that want to themselves be out there in the ground planting trees or digging out the channel itself. Working with David, he was kind of in that middle area of wanting to be involved with designing the project, especially the in-stream work. Being an engineer himself, took a hand at doing the channel design, and then let us be responsible for the planting of the buffer after the channel work was done. And then also David really working with me over the last couple of years to make sure that we continue to keep the invasive species, especially the canary grass, under control so that the trees had an opportunity to grow up and continue getting all that sunlight they need to thrive and to create a healthy riparian buffer. My reaction to seeing the restoration is amazement. Some of the trees have grown 10 feet since we put them in the ground, which is incredible over the first 3 years. We have willows that are 15 feet tall now and really starting to create that canopy that can make the canary grass disappear in a couple of years. And our conifer trees that are going to be that large wood recruitment in the future are really taking off now, and you can see them poking their heads up out of the grass even before we've come in to knock down the weeds. And it's just overall just exciting to see a project that I was involved with from the design phase to implementing to now really on the right trajectory to being a successful planting.
I think restoration is a critical first step for landowners to take. You know, your car can't move if the engine's broken down, and there are points of degradation in the system resulting from land use history, climate change, invasive species, and so forth. And these have disrupted many of the natural processes in the system. So restoration, it's not about recreating the past per se, but rather reestablishing and ensuring the integrity of key natural processes. Then we can come alongside nature as a partner and work with a functional system toward a positive and sustainable future.
I think the restoration is doing really well. The trees are really growing quickly. I think it was inputted in 2016, so you can see the trees are already pretty tall, and I think the channel's still operating the way we are hoping it will, but we're still keeping an eye on it to make sure it's going to function well.
So they did bring in some big equipment, and here you can see the channel being constructed. We had some work parties. This one was one open to the public, where people just came in and helped us plant trees alongside the stream. The Conservation District also had a day when some school kids came out and planted, and they've been active with had the Conservation Corps out there helping us keep the weeds down, and it's all been a great help. We couldn't do it without them. Here you can see the completed rechannelization of the stream through the lower field. It's about 150 yards from where we started the work to where it goes, connects back into the old stream downstream. And here you can see it in the wintertime with some of the willows alongside the stream that were planted. And this is a map. Again, our restoration section was right through here, through the lower field. And it's about a quarter mile from there downstream to where the creek enters into Pilchuck Creek. This whole area is in the Pilchuck Creek floodplain. So we had salmon using the channel right away after we got it done that next fall. And there's some good spawning gravel up in here, and they got up in there and we're using it. And they came back every year, except then in 2018, we didn't have any. And so I went downstream to investigate and discovered that there were some beaver dams that were impenetrable to the salmon. Now, usually a beaver dam wouldn't be, but in this case, the water was only 2 or 3 inches deep down here. And so that didn't give them a place where they could jump from, where they get the verticality that they need in order to get over the dam. And there's too much brush in the way for them to go through the dam. So I called up Wayne Watney, who was the fisheries biologist with the Department of Fish and Wildlife, who I dealt with when we permitted for the bridge, and said, Wayne, can you come out and help me? We got to figure out something here so the salmon can get through these beaver dams. And so he and I and Channing Sims walked down the stream, and we found the beaver dams. And he said, well, you know, if you just put notches in them, that way the right before the salmon come up, that'd probably work. And so I went ahead and did that. And that combined with the fact that we had some flooding last fall then that wiped this. Now you notice this log here, that's the same log as this here. We had the flooding in early November completely wiped out the beaver dams and this part of the stream, the flooding from Pilchuck Creek, that is. And so then in the Thanksgiving week, Dara and I went down and went onto the bridge, and I shot this video standing on the bridge of the silvers coming upstream. Here's some more shot from the same place. It was just really neat to see these fish there coming upstream just in this area. There's good spawning gravel here, and there's a team that came in from the Department of Fish and Wildlife doing a survey to see where fish were spawning, and they counted a whole bunch of reds upstream of us there that like they'd never seen before, and then came down and we found a dead fish beside the stream, and she took a sample of that fish so she could go back to the lab and look at the genetic diversity of the salmon that are coming up in this area. And so then this spring we have hundreds of little salmon in the creek right now. You can see them right here. Those are about 1 inch long. And here's a close-up of one of them. This fish is about 1 inch long. And the beavers are back this spring. We have 4 dams now. So this is one of the beaver dams. And I set out our video camera. I started taking, actually, I set out our wildlife camera, put it on video mode to get this picture. And this one. And with the beaver came some other wildlife. We've never seen mergansers before anywhere on our property. And they also created habitat for some herons. Now, this is the book. If you haven't read this book, I highly recommend it. It's called Eager by Ben Goldfarb. It's a natural history of beavers in North America and what happened to the North American landscape when the fur trappers nearly made the beavers extinct, and how that really changed the nature of the streams in our country, and about efforts that are being made today to return beavers to the landscape, and about the people that are doing it. I highly recommend this book. It's a really good read, fascinating read. Now, when we were given the state award for Tree Farmers of the Year, we felt it was important that we have an open house to showcase the people that had helped us, the people and organizations that had helped us. We had a booth from the WSU Extension Forestry, the Farm Forestry Association, the Snohomish Conservation District, the Plant Material Center, the Small Landowners Office from the Department of Natural Resources, and the Washington Tree Farm program. All these people gave us a lot of help with our tree farm, and we wouldn't have been anywhere without them. And so we had the open house where they could show other people what it was that they do, and we had about 200 people come through just to visit our tree farm on that particular day. Now, last fall, when we were told that we were to receive the national award, they sent out a videographer from Washington, D.C. to shoot some video of us, and he had a drone, and the two boys were really fascinated with the drone. And so here's the result of that video.
The land was acquired by my grandfather. He would go around to different places and he would trade land for him doing the logging. He had pieces of property all over the place. I spent a lot of my childhood here. We were free to roam anywhere we wanted, just as long as we came back when someone rung a bell. Dave and the rest of my family, we really wanted to keep it.
Our taxes were through the roof without being on open space. We needed to have a forest management plan. I didn't know anything about forestry at the time. In fact, I could hardly tell a spruce tree from a hemlock. So we hired a professional forester to write a forest management plan for us.
Dave picked up very quickly that he needed to find resources. That really made a difference because that forester helped him along the way.
I met the new family through the Coach Stewardship Planning course that WSU puts on. A lot of landowners won't go through that effort, and they will run into issues down the road with permitting or finding loggers, finding markets, and finding people to help.
And one of the things that's key about the Tree Farm program and Washington Farm Forestry is neighbor helping neighbor.
Those connections, that networking, I think is one of the most important aspects of the Tree Farm program. Dave was a sponge and he wanted to soak up as much information and education as he could. He was very proactive. The American Tree Farm program really gives them a goal to shoot for, and it brings well-earned recognition of good stewardship.
One year we were hanging out and looked up and we saw a bank of eagles. So we walked out to see what they were doing, and we saw salmon attempting to find their way through the weeds. And the eagles were sitting in the trees just picking them off as they swam up over the grass. So that was the starting point of when we decided we really wanted to try to do some habitat restoration. But the project was too big for us to just tackle on our own as a family.
The Snohomish Conservation District works with people on a voluntary basis. We can bring the technical resources, so engineers, habitat specialists like myself, farm planners who can help people figure out how they can manage their property better. The new family live on Pilchuck Creek, which flows into the Stillaguamish River. So they had a great opportunity to help restore this watershed. And this watershed in particular is really important for salmon recovery. So the work that they did on this property is really helping locally very much, but also helping the bigger region.
I really enjoyed watching heavy equipment come through and rebuild the channel, and now seeing it become a legitimate stream that's now habitat for salmon.
It's just clear that they are looking at this property not just as something for their family, but also for just future generations.
One of our goals for sharing this piece of property with the community is to see really what the woods is. It's just really worth sharing, like the salmon run. When we have brought other people's kids down here, they've been totally amazed at what it's like to see salmon going up a creek. They had no idea. I think we owe it to this whole community, to this whole area, to keep this natural and open and wild.
10 years ago, I didn't know anything about forestry at all. We could see that it was something that needed to be done, so we just burrowed down and did it. And if we can do it, anybody can do it.
So we talked a little bit how we use the property for recreation, how we manage the woods that are on the property, about the wildlife that's on our property and how we take care of the water that flows through it. These are the 4 main precepts of the tree farm program. So there are 70,000 properties in the state of Washington, 5 acres or larger, that are wooded. Of those, there are about 1,000 of us that have certified tree farms. There's another 1,000 people, somewhat overlapping group, that belong to the Washington Farm Forestry Association. It's a group of us that we share, we help each other and with our problems on the land, and also lobby for our needs with the local government and the state government. There's also about 4,000 people that have taken a stewardship forestry class from Washington State University Extension Forestry. And so that means there's about 5,000 folks or so that have these signs in front of their properties. Now, yes, we have been given some recognition for the stuff that we do, but we are just one family of thousands that are all doing great things. And it's what goes on behind the sign that all these other people that are due that is really important and needs to be recognized as well.
Green and white signs. The Washington Tree Farm program is not just about the sign. It's what's behind the sign. The commitment to the land, the determination to continue even when problems arise, finding solutions, learning from neighbors. It's the work that goes into planting a forest for the next generations. One that takes time, effort, and money. A forest that may not be old enough to harvest during your lifetime. It's about sustaining wildlife habitat. Having a diverse forest that can maintain species in different stages. It's clean water. It's taking care of the land. It's land that might be turned into blocks of houses, but instead is planted by hand. It's creating wood products that are sustainable, providing a resource that will ensure that forests will continue to grow. It's a renewable forest harvested so that others can be protected. And educating the public, showing the importance of farms. It's about family. It's about growing up on the farm, learning from others and growing as the trees grow. It's about learning to work hard alongside your tree farmer, whether it's your mother, father, or grandfather. It's about multiple generations and history. And favorite spots that are passed down from one generation to the next. The sign is a symbol of the tree farmer, the family, the work. It's what's behind the sign. The Washington State Tree Farmers.
Now, to be a certified tree farmer or to have a certified tree farm, you don't have to be harvesting it. It's all about taking care of the land, taking care of the woods. And to that end, there's a book that I don't know how I got this copy, but it's one I got when I was just starting out, and I highly recommend it to anybody that wants to take care of the woods on their land. And the first chapter of this book is titled, Why Take Care of Your Land? Why Take Care of Your Woods? And I have been given permission by the publisher of the book to give copies of that first chapter out. And if any of you out there would like to have a copy, let us know and we'll make sure that you get one. And that particular book, this particular chapter goes into the history of forest management in the country, and also where we are today, and gives a moral imperative of why we should be managing our woods properly. Finally, we wouldn't have been anywhere without a whole lot of help from a whole lot of people. And so I would like to thank and acknowledge a whole bunch of people here that helped us. First of all, Leroy Nourse, Dar's grandfather, and her uncle Bob Nourse, who were the original owners. Dar's mother, Nana Hoyt, who was instrumental in helping us keep the land. Tom Westergreen and others from the Whatcom County Farm Forestry Association and the Washington Farm Forestry Association. Kevin Zobrist and others from WSU Extension Forestry. Boyd Norton, a retired DNR stewardship forester. Wayne Watney with the State Department of Fish and Wildlife. Ryan Williams, Kristen Marshall, Carson Moscoso and others from the Snohomish Conservation District. Pete Blansett, a forester with S.A. Newman. Tammy Peralt, Jenny Knoth, John Hendrickson, Andrea Watts, Bob Obazinski, and Elizabeth Ide and others from the Washington Tree Farm program. Without the help of these people, we quite literally would have been literally and figuratively lost in the weeds. Now, if any of you out there would desire to get help with your property, any one of these people could help you, and getting a hold of someone at the Conservation District or me or any one of these other groups, it would be a good starting point. So with that then, I would say thank you for watching. And it's time for questions. Sarah, I can't hear you.
Thank you so much, Dave. That was so wonderful. That was my first time seeing your presentation, and I just truly enjoyed all of the small details and a lot of the documentation that you did throughout the history, being involved with your current family, aside from your wife's history with it. And I'm just wondering, like, what made you just start documenting a lot of things you were seeing, a lot of the critters? Like, what made that interesting to you?
Well, we've always been a family that took family photos, and so it just made sense just to continue doing that here at the river at our tree farm. I also keep a diary. Every time we go there, I write down what we did that day so we've got a record of that so that we can look back and say, oh, this happened this time of year. The fish came back this week, and our first frost was this week, etc.
That's awesome. No one has asked a question so far, but there's been a few or a couple who are interested in getting that chapter of the book, so we'll make sure that's sent out too.
Okay, I'll make sure that you get that.
Perfect. I also have another question. In part of the video, I saw you applying a yellow netting to a young sapling, and I'm just wondering.
Well, that wasn't me. That was another guy. But yes, that was a cedar tree, and so deer think of the tops of cedar trees as being candy, especially in wintertime. Cedars grow all year round, and so that netting is put on them so that the deer can't eat them. And then they move it, and as the tree grows, that gets moved up the tree so that, again, the deer can't get them. Now, what we do instead of that is we plant a cedar tree and a spruce tree together in the same hole. And that way, the spruce tree has really spiny needles, and the deer do not like to have their tender lips poked by the needles of a spruce tree. So if there's a spruce tree and a cedar tree right next to one another, they'll leave the cedar alone. And then as the tree gets big enough, then we'll cut the spruce out, so it'll just be a cedar tree.
I've seen that example on your property, and that's been great. We have a few questions coming in. Let me ask you the first one. The first question is, what time of the year do salmon swim up the stream?
Okay, the salmon that are out in Pilchuck Creek come up generally around the first week in October, the second week in October. That's, as I said, that's before we have water back in our seasonal stream again. But the pink salmon, or humpies, the same different name for the same fish, only come back every other year, and that happens to be the odd numbers years. And that's the same as it is all over Puget Sound. And so we do make, on those odd numbers years, we make the trek down to see the fish come up the stream every other year. The silvers come in late November and early December. It's a late fall, early winter run, and that's after the water has gotten back in our seasonal stream after the rains have started. And when we first started out down there, we didn't give the silvers much thought because it is a seasonal stream. The small silvers stay in the small streams for 2 years before migrating out to sea. And so because of that, I always assumed that because this was a seasonal stream, there's no way that the young fish could survive through the summer without any water. But Wayne Watney pointed out to us otherwise, and so that's what got us going down the track of restoring the stream.
I think in addition to that is that you creating that stream is such a refuge for those young salmon. And when rivers are altered and they're straightened, that means the velocity of the water is much faster than it normally would be, and it could flush those young salmon out into the ocean before they're ready. And so you doing what you did has just greatly improved many populations of salmon in the area. We have another question for you, Dave. When you harvest the land, does it significantly decrease the wildlife until the trees grow back?
Actually, it's just the other way around. By taking the trees down, we greatly increased the number of deer that we saw on the property, and also increased the number of birds that are out there. We have, before we logged, we didn't have any goldfinch, and now we can go up on the hill and we can see dozens, if not 20 or 30 goldfinch at a time. That having that open habitat created habitat for the birds. And in regard to that, also in New England, in the state of Vermont, the American Tree Farm system is working with landowners there to open up their land. This is kind of an aside here. In the late 70s, there were a whole lot of farms that went out of, it just stopped being farms in Vermont. And so the land reverted back to being woods. And when that happened, the open habitat for the songbirds disappeared. And so there are significantly fewer songbirds in New England now than beforehand. And so the American Forest Foundation, the American Tree Farm System, is working with the Audubon Society and landowners to create emergent forests, i.e. clearing the land so that they're creating fields, creating emergent forests to create habitat for songbirds. And likewise, that's what happened to our property when we logged as well. We're just overrun with deer right now, with as open as it is.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, I would have to imagine in replanting, taking out a lot of alder, you would have put in a much diverse tree planting. So you're getting, lots of Douglas fir and other tree species that I've seen on your property.
Yeah, well, we replanted primarily with the two species, Douglas fir and alder. But in the meantime, there's other species that are coming up alongside that. There's some alders and some cottonwoods that we're going to have to take down, and some other things, vine maples and whatnot. And we're not going after actually maximizing our timber production like the big timber companies. And then they're creating habitat too, but we're going a little bit, we're broadening out a little bit and having a diverse habitat out there on top of the hill so that there will be hopefully better habitat for animals as well. And you'll find that a lot of small landowner foresters like ourselves are doing the same thing.
We have another question for you. Is it important to have a land survey done when establishing the tree farm?
Well, before I retired, I worked as a civil engineer and land surveyor. So yes, we did survey the property before we did any harvesting. And actually we surveyed it prior to selling the property back before the recession. And that was a part of that whole process. So yes, it is important to know where your property lines are before you do any harvesting. And I was fortunate enough to be able to then create good maps of the property as well from that survey.
Thank you. Another question, when you harvest the land, does it, sorry, I already answered that. Can I buy the Managing Your Woods at the local bookstore? Do you know if that book is available?
I know that it's available on Amazon. I've seen it there, and I think I did pick mine up at a local bookstore here. If you'd rather go to the local bookstore, I'm sure that they can order it for you. Again, that's A Landowner's Guide to Managing Your Woods, and we can make sure that you get that that title, and it's written by Anne Larkin. I forget her last name. I'm gonna tell you what. I'll go back. I'm going to go back to the screen, and we'll bring that up. We'll go back to that. Oops, wrong one, wrong share.
Another question for you, Dave, while you're doing that. Someone asked if you ever eat the salmon on your property.
No, we do not. Here's that book, A Landowner's Guide to Managing Your Woods by Anne Larkin Hansen, Mike Severson, and Dennis Waterman. By the time the fish get up to where we are, and they're just about ready to spawn. And so they're too beat up to be really good eating. So we don't catch them or eat them. It's just fun to go down and watch them. So here again, this is that book, A Landowner's Guide to Managing Your Woods.
Thank you for that. And we have another question coming in. Is there a size of your property that you need to have for forestry help, receiving forestry help? Are you aware of that?
No. In order to be a certified tree farm, the current rules say you have to have 10 acres, but you don't have to have any size property. If you want to have somebody from WSU Extension come out or get help from the small landowner's office, there's no size limit there. They'll work with you. Now with this, we're kind of short these days. The DNR is kind of short on their stewardship foresters. I know that in Skagit County they have that the conservation district has a forester on staff that can go out and visit people, and maybe we could get the Snohomish Conservation District to do the same thing, and it'd be kind of a nice thing. As it turns out, there are more forested parcels in Snohomish County than any other county in the state, and so it would be totally appropriate for the conservation district to hire a forester to be on staff. Little dig on my part there, but yeah, no, and the Farm Forestry Association, there's no size limit there. There's people that belong to the Farm Forestry Association that don't even have woods, and there again, in our local Whatcom County chapter, 2 or 3 times a year we have tours on various people's farms, tree farms, and we go out and see what they're doing. And I've never been on a tree farm tour yet where I didn't learn something that I could take back and use on my own.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dave, for answering questions. I just want to give another minute to anyone who has a burning question for Dave. A lot of people are just saying thank you and they enjoyed your talk. I also truly enjoyed it.
Well, if anyone out there knows anyone else who would like to see it and like to have me do it for them live, I'm more than willing to do so. So yeah, get a hold of me and we can do that.
Yeah, and I also want to mention we have a Living with Beavers webinar / virtual talk coming on May 28th. So if you're interested, look at our events calendar at Snohomish Conservation District and you can find more information for that webinar. Lisa Kerr, she's our resident beaver guru, and she just brings so much enthusiasm to the team. We're really excited to do a webinar with her.
I'll be sure to tune in on that one.
Perfect. Let's see if we have any more questions. I think that's it for questions. Really appreciate your time. We have some of the links in the chat for those of you who are interested for some of those upcoming webinars or more information. And please feel free to reach out to us at outreach@snohomishcd.org for any questions or any more information you all need.
And thank you everybody for watching. I enjoyed doing this. And if you want to reach out to me as well, feel free to do so.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dave, for doing this. This was wonderful.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Dave.
All right. You all have a great night.
Good night, everyone. Thanks for
night.
coming.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.